Patrick says, happy Tuesday, guys. Forget 6.4. When are we getting the 7.0 trailer? So what do you think, Chris? When are we going to see the 7.0 trailer?
July 28th, right?
Will you be there?
It'll be the opening portion of FanFest. Literally, FanFest will begin with the trailer, and when the trailer ends and it flashes to the name, that'll be the first time we know 7.0's name, and we stop calling it 7.0 as often. And we start referring it to by the name, and we all agree on, hope to God, a name that's not an S and a B.
Yeah.
That was
rough.
That was rough.
And then you had ew. Yeah, so if you guys aren't aware, July 28th in Vegas, Chris is going to be there. I will be live here on the YouTube Twitch side of things, and then we might have a man on the street moment. Chris might be able to, like, I don't want to steal him away if there's lots of hype stuff going on at the convention, but we will let you guys know what our plans are so we can kind of give you up-to-date information on 7.0. And I think that's a good time to kind of sit here and say thank you guys so much for hitting the like button on the live show. We really appreciate that. We generally film these on Mondays and Tuesdays with highlights that roll out across the week. So be sure to check your feed. Be sure to ring that bell, subscribe if you haven't already. And if you guys hit the like button on the videos, that's a really good way of helping out the channel and helping us cover what we like to cover in this case. Now, I think it's important that we spend the rest of the time talking about the preview for this week, 6.4, going into the live letter this Friday. We're going to be live covering it here as we usually do. Chris, why don't you give everybody a rundown of what to expect in this live letter for anybody who's coming back to the game and's been on a break, for anybody who's new and this is their first Final Fantasy, 0.4 patch. What should they understand? What do they need to know before Friday?
So it's their first ever. Every patch in Final Fantasy XIV, we hear from the devs, not once, but twice. The first of those is a big overview of what the patch is. The patches are largely a pretty big framework that was laid out early on. Any major changes to that were gone over in the roadmap presentation that was February before last, I think. And so that feels right. So we've had this, if it was last February, time really is messing with me. But if we've had this roadmap that's kind of laid out, and we have a general idea of what the patches are going to do. In addition to that, every patch with these two live letters takes the first one and just goes over the big things, and the second one gets to show us actual gameplay. This is going to go over everything that's in the 6.4 cycle, which means everything from 6.4 through 6.41 into the half patch of 6.45, and even if we get something late like a 6.48, anything like that, it will take us all the way to 6.5, which means that FanFest will happen during it. So yes, this will go over gameplay elements. Maybe they'll show us some of the new Blue Mage stuff, or they'll show off the new island stuff, or they'll show us a platform from the new raid or something like that. There are definitely some solid predictions there as fun things. But when I was asked, what surprise do I think they'll have? Because sometimes at these events, this is where we find that there's some new big UI change coming, or some big thing in the distant that they're said, it's not ready now, but we want you to be looking forward to it. What big surprise do I think will be in the 6.4 part 2 live letter, which is like live letter number 77 or something like that? My prediction is that there actually won't be one. My prediction is that the community will feel that this is a sign that the game is sick, that there is a frustration, that the devs are just kind of mailing it in, that we are going to get confirmation based on the Dengeki article that the next relic is just 1,500 tomes. That sounds like I'm being negative here, but here is why. I believe that if they have a big surprise around the corner, they will save it for July 28th. And so I believe that if they have big things that would make this live letter exciting, those are going to be held in the wings to be part of the big exciting reveal in July. So when we come out of this live letter, if it turns out to just be an ordinary live letter and nobody's really that excited, I wouldn't take that as a sign of bad. I would just take that as a sign of, if they had something good to say, it's probably at FanFest, which is a bigger audience. It has live translation, and it's just better. As opposed to live letters are Japanese only. It's only a fraction of the player base that consumes them, and some of those player bases are only consuming it through summaries and stuff like ours anyway. And so I just think that if you have big news and you have an event right around the corner, why would you reveal it now?
There's interesting kind of pieces. I'm going to highlight some comments that I kind of starred while we were going on. Patrick saying, low-key fact, nothing in live letter 6.4 or 6.5 will entice Brian to return. A 7.x trailer is as good as Shadowbringers might do it. And I don't think a trailer alone would do that. I'm not sitting here trying to knock it. It's really actually about the features list. What are they trying to do and to address? Like, I've seen a lot of frustration and concern on Twitter. In fact, actually, I've been working on a video to kind of defend 14 because I think there is a lot of things that people end up missing. And this kind of ties into a lot of our other conversations we've had on today's show specifically. But in that note, when you start to think about how Yoshi P manages the team and the budget and the planning, he's years ahead. He's planning, and when he talks about spare no expense, when he talks about all these big buzzwords that should get you excited, but then when you start looking at how the Endwalker patch cycle has fared, I absolutely, and you know, whether you agree with me or not, like the community overall, when I see longtime people, when I see Chili, when I see, you know, Fusion X, a Gamerscape, when I see all these big content creators hitting this weird wall that they just either didn't expect to hit, or this overall burnout, or this overall fatigue, I think what everybody keeps missing in that conversation is the fact that a lot of this planning and the budget from Endwalker to 7.0 happened before the big rush, before like all of a sudden we saw 14 really surge. So that budget, that planning was set, and there was a reason why. And to highlight why I feel so confident in this is that when the pandemic happened, 14 kept making content. The reason it did is because that was already planned and being worked on. They didn't have, like, outside of transitioning into kind of like allowing for more remote work and how that would all function, they still delivered content, and everybody else was walking around going like, we haven't had like, y'all get patches and updates. We don't know when the next one is. In fact, it's been 9 months or 11 months or whatever period of time. And so I think essentially what you're looking at right now is you're looking at pandemic planning, server planning, like all these things that were happening 2 years ago. And that probably is what is causing a lot of the frustration. Meanwhile, that spare no expense, that budgetary and that planning has all been going on behind the scenes. And you're going to start to see that pay off with 7.0. At least that's my hope. We'll see the graphical update. That doesn't appeal to me personally. We'll see all these little things. And really what it comes down to is what are they going to do about the core gaming experience? If it's just an expansion story, I don't think I'll be back for that. I'm not trying to insult 14 for that, but I finished the story. I haven't seen any reason to get kind of back on that hook for another saga. And maybe it's there, but that's just personally how I'm kind of feeling on it. What do you think, Chris?
Both Ian Hazakostas and Yoshi P have implied that the development cycle begins but does not end with this kind of like 2 year ahead moment. So the first structure gets outlined, it seems like about 2 years in advance, and then the work begins, and that continues all the way up until quality checks that come out right before the patch.
Right.
And so when you look back over the last 2 or 3 years, and you look at things like budgets and how much effort was put into planning and things like that, the game has undergone a pretty significant change 2 years ago or so, when we all went under a pretty drastic set of changes, and we all decided to stay inside for a while. And so with that, yes, there will be ripples, and those ripples will take 2 to 3 years to shake out. And in addition to that, if there was anything learned from that time at home, if there was anything that they think is better, we'd like to move to work from home, or we found a new way of testing ultimates because we had to, and we like this way better, that could take up to 2 to 3 years for them to realize, like, what are the things we want to keep, and what are the things that we'd really like to get back to the way it was before. And that's something that Blizzard's having some really tough growing pains with. And so 7.0 is part of that healing process. And I think there's a chance that 7.0 will see some of the beginnings of that spare no expense, but some of that will also trickle into 8.0. Like it's going to just take that time. And in the meantime, what if Creative Business Unit 3 does so well with Final Fantasy 16 that they start doing more projects and Yoshi P gets spread more thin? What if Final Fantasy 16 turns out that it kind of is just average, and Yoshi P is really good at saving and fixing and managing a project this size, but when given a chance to kind of take a leadership role on a brand new team based on his own actions and on the other actions of the team, that the result is just okay. Like there is a world where Final Fantasy 16 is just okay. There is a world where Final Fantasy 16 is the greatest of all time, and there's a bunch of worlds in between. And as of now, we just don't know which one we're headed into.
Right.
And so like all of that is going to impact as well. But I think that when people look at like the Final Fantasy 16 tax, and you find out that Final Fantasy 16's been under development for a long time, like that's just how far back these things go. These decisions are way, way, way in advance. So you bring up a valid point that like when you're looking at 6.4, what was going on in 5.4?
Right. What was going on 2 years prior? And it wasn't great. Like, we all don't want to return to that. But what was happening and what you didn't see is that the fact is that train kept on rolling. And like Ephraim says, if anything else, like if nothing else, we don't know even about 16, but we do feel this is that Yoshi P's ability to manage is top notch. The fact that content keeps rolling out, the fact that 16 news and information keeps rolling out. 16 was also developed during this same period of time. And yet we'll find out being able to go hands-on with it personally. And again, thank you so much to this amazing community. Chris was able to surprise it. He actually filmed my reaction to it. I now am a proud owner of a PS5. I have 2 PS5 controllers and no PS5 games. So I think the first order of business is I'm going to pick up the Pixel Remaster Collection on the PS5. And I think that's just perfect because, hey, Brian, what do you do with your PS5? I'm playing a 30-year-old game. Like, I'm living the dream, boys. I'm playing it because that's what I want to do. Like, I want to, as just a thank you, I'm trying to find some time to schedule so that I can stream me playing Final Fantasy IV, which is the Final Fantasy that made me fall in love with Final Fantasy. And it's been over, I think, 32 years since I played that game.